reading? Legal Insights, DEI for Real. And this is actually our second pass at this. In the first pass, we called it a soft launch. It was so soft that we didn't record it. So this is our re-recording. But we do remember some of the comments that people made, and we'll try and incorporate them as we go. So DEI, we know, is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And REAL is what we came up with for our legal insights. We want to reassure you that you're not going crazy. It is a little bit of a crazy world out there right now. We want to educate you on things to do, things not to do. We want to activate you. And when I think of activate, I think of when I was on college tours with my daughter, we went to, and she ended up selecting Loyola in Chicago. And their motto, what they wanted for their students, was to find their life's passion, become excellent at it, and give back to the world. And I'm hoping that that's what we can do with Activate, is help you find your passion for DEI if you don't already have it, activate you, and become a leader. That's the L. Be a leader. And for that, look inside. And so let me progress. Why now? Well, you have better places to be than in court is the short answer. Misinformation abounds. We know that happens. And there's a certain segment of the current administration that wants to move fast and break things. And what it's causing is chaos. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today. And we are your presenters. I would like to introduce you to Nancy Schick. She's an employment lawyer and mediator based in New York City, where the firm that she founded, is owner of, CEO, president, chief honcho, is Third Ear Conflict Resolution, which has been in business since 2003. Before that, she worked in human resources, which is very valuable for our discussion today. And also, I thought this was really interesting that I learned about you, Nancy, is that you have taught at the business law, you have taught business law at the American Academy McAllister Institute, and served as, oh, I gotta move my little screen here, as compliance and diversity trainer at CUNY Queens College, where she was also a Title IX investigator. So that's a little bit about Nancy. Take it away, Nancy.
So you put the pressure on me now, Chris, to do you justice, which I absolutely will not. But I think a lot of the people watching this probably already know you. But Chris is the CEO of Spectra Diversity, and Spectra, I learned from being on your website recently, promoting, I think, probably this webinar series. I learned that not only do you handle the assessments, but you have a lot of resources for people that can help actually implement some of the changes that need to occur once employers, for example, have identified some key issues in their workplace. And that's where you and I frequently talk, right, about the errors that occur in employment situations where DEI is performative, for lack of a better description, right? And we'll get into some of that, I'm sure, in the series. We've been talking about it for quite a while. You've done prior series about that. So not only does Spectra do these assessments to help you identify what's going on specifically in your workplace, Chris then can also provide as a resource, or be a resource, and provide other resources if they're outside her expertise. So I see Spectra as kind of putting their arms around employers, right, to make sure that they can navigate this very colorful, potentially beautiful, but also potentially chaotic highway that is represented in the image there.
That's us, the information highway. We're leading the way. And just a little personal note, Nancy and I we met on LinkedIn through some workshop that we both went to or something. And then I was in New York City doing my semi-regular Broadway sessions. And I said, Nancy, let's get together. Let's have coffee. And that was a few years ago, and we've been talking regularly ever since. So Nancy's in the Big Apple. I'm in Minnesota. So let's
And
get
today I'm in Virginia.
Oh, today you're in Virginia. Well, there you go.
All
So
over the place.
DEI for real. Let's start with the reassurance part. So these are some of the challenges that we are currently facing. We know that DEI is under attack. We've got, some of the headlines there. But the death of DEI may be premature. And I addressed this in the other webinar series, is that DEI is not going away, basically. 43%, this is new data, 43% of companies are keeping their DEI goals. 67% of companies have targeted diverse talent, and Nancy will talk a little bit about targeting. And then 70% of companies have supplier diversity programs. So what is going on in the federal government is not necessarily what's going on, and I'm going to call it the real world. And this is, we did a poll. This is from our previous recording that didn't happen. How would you describe the state of DEI right now? And these are some of the words that our participants put in there. Misunderstood, resilient, essential, weaponized. I really was drawn to that one because there's, it seems like a concerted effort to divide people rather than bring people together. Nancy, any reflections on?
I believe resilient was actually my word that I had typed in during that survey. And I think that's where I'm going to continue to look. I mean, of course, there are continued attacks. But what we're finding is the courts are kind of muddling through this as well. We're going to continue to see cases be taken to the US Supreme Court. They're going to kind of parse through some of this. We have the Ames case that we're waiting on the decision. Might take a little bit longer than what we had anticipated. We have been expecting it this summer, but with all of the other legal challenges going on that are taking priority, it might take a few more weeks for the Ames decision, but we are anticipating that it will help us define more clearly the parameters around DEI programs. So I do think that it's resilient. And the other reason I had chosen that when we did the original webinar was that we had just seen some of the other companies have their annual shareholders meetings, and they voted. It was Merck, I think Apple, Costco, several others have voted against their shareholders who were asking for removal of DEI initiatives. And all of those companies, there's I believe, correct me with her name, or help me with her name, Chris. It's Nancy Stearns.
Oh, yeah, Nancy, yeah, I'll get it.
Yeah, we'll put a link in the notes to the video, but
Thank
she
you.
has a running list on Impactivize, I think is her company. And she has a running list of the companies that are standing by their DEI initiatives, although to point at another word there, transforming is still going to be part of that process. So to be able to get beyond the illegal and divisive standards that the federal government has put out there for us, there is going to have to be some transformation of the DEI programs, but I think that can be done without abandoning them.
Okay, thank you. And okay, educate. Ooh, big one. Okay, this is old data. This is companies. This is from a mass of companies. So this is from Forbes, this particular set of data that they reported on. But more importantly, I think, is that And in each individual organization could be somewhere on this spectrum, but they could be below it or they could be above it. So I think when you're looking at data, it's nice to see what the big picture is, and this is big picture data, but it's really important to look at your own data, because what's happening in Des Moines, Iowa is not what's happening in Keokuk, Iowa, or in New Orleans. You know, every community and every organization is different.
And I'll kind of emphasize what you're saying there, Chris, is we have to also remember, and I think multi-state employers already know this because they're juggling it already, but the laws from state to state regarding DEI have become very, very different, and that can be a difficult thing to navigate. But that's another reason we're doing this series, is to help at least identify some of the areas that you need to focus and where you need to look for potential problems and how you can navigate this. We won't have all the answers. You'll probably still need to get legal counsel in each of the states where you have employees or workers who could be deemed your employees.
Thank you. So what we've been seeing is a lot of executive orders. And this is what an executive order is. You know, the president of the state issues it because the president manages operations of the federal government. And while it carries the force of law, it does not require congressional approval. The authority to issue executive orders comes from the Constitution. However, they're limited in scope to federal operations. And this is the part that is happening now. They can be revoked or modified by future presidents. And a lot of the old executive orders are being, like, wiped out, killed, dead, changed. So this is the difference between an executive order and a law. This is, Nancy and I are a member of the Unity Huddle, which is a private DEI group, invitation only. And one of the members did this side-by-side comparison. So I'd like you to look at judicial review, maybe more easily overturned if lacking constitutional and statutory support. And we are see some of that happening, whereas a law is subject to review, but it's more durable because Congress has approved it, or Congress created it, and the president approved it.
And I'll just note that that's one of the reasons that we're seeing actions such as withdrawing funds, even though the budget has dedicated funds, and we're going to continue to see some of those challenges. And then the other things that have been done to try and get around this judicial and congressional review, right, or oversight for Congress, is the basically defunding and understaffing certain administrative agencies. And that's what we're also going to continue to see some challenges on that. So I bring that up because I think it's that R, right? That reassurance is recognize that we're going through exactly, unfortunately, what I predicted at the beginning of this presidential term. We're going to see how well our government works. We're going to see the holes in the boat, and hopefully we'll be able to plug them.
And I want to go back for a second because I don't know that everybody knows what AIMS is and the AIMS decision. Can you just give me a summary of what that case is about?
Great. Thank you. I talk about AIMS so often, and I'm going to be teaching on that case once the decision is written. But it's a case that I believe came out of Ohio. It's a cisgender white woman has claimed that she was discriminated against based on her identity as cisgender white and female, right? She had applied for a promotion that she did not get. That promotion was given to, I believe, a gay man. And she said,
also white?
That I do not remember in the facts of the case. I just know that that's a big part of it. And what we're probably going to find anyway is that we're anticipating the Supreme Court's probably going to say if there's at all a basis of the hiring decision that fell on sex, which includes gender identity, sexual preference, etc. That's what we're anticipating. But she didn't get the promotion, and then not only did she not get the promotion, and it was given to a gay man, I believe she lost her job also and then was replaced by a gay man. So that was when she filed suit. She said that I believe the employer has some sort of kind of affirmative action or initiative to increase the diversity. And she's claiming that that was the cause of them terminating her, not actual cause. So we'll see how this plays out. That's a quick summary. I apologize if I didn't get all the facts exactly correct.
Well,
Stay tuned for when that decision comes out.
I will correct you on one point. It's not sexual preference, it's sexual orientation.
Under the law, sex is anything to do with gender identity, sexual preference, etc. So I'm stating it under Title VII. We don't need to argue about it. It's really like I said, it's anything, if you're basing it on sex, that's the way Title VII is written. It does not have gender identity in there. It does not have sexual preference. It does not have non-binary. It doesn't have anything other than sex. That's the word.
Just in the DEI community, that's kind of a touchy subject, is you don't prefer.
I get it, but I'm just telling you what the law is.
Okay, all right. Moving on. So this is what happened on January 21st. Ending the legal order was called Ending Illegal Discrimination and Restoring Merit-Based Opportunity. And I think this is the place where I mentioned that there is a workshop that's going to occur in the fall. We'll provide a link to it. That is, it used to be called DIRC, Diversity, Inclusion, Research Conference, and they're adding MEI in addition to DEI because merit and doing the contrast between what is merit and what is diversity. So that's going to be coming up, and I will put a link in the notes for that as well. Yeah, a lot of executive orders there. So this is what was revoked on day one. Advancing DEI in the federal workforce, advancing racial equity and support, further advancing racial equity through institutionalized equity teams, preventing discrimination. Oh, you can read it yourself, but basically, it was a whole bunch of stuff that was wiped out on, or supposedly wiped out on day one.
We'll call it an attempt. These are several of them are being challenged, and one of the big ones that I think we have to note is the accessibility, and that's one of the first ones we're anticipating there will be the most action on because it's arguably in direct conflict with the Americans with Disability Act.
That should be a big one.
Yeah. That'll be a big one. So we're waiting on that one to play out as well.
And 26% of our working population has a disability. So it's a lot of people. So let's get to the activate part. And there's something that was in SHRM about DEI activity, and they called it the 3 Ps. You shouldn't be doing it, according to SHRM, if it confers a preference, meaning that some individuals are treated more favorably, if the preference is given to members of a legally protected group, such as Title VII or the ADA, any sort of a preferred group, and that the preference relates to a palpable benefit, such as a job, a promotion, a pay raise. Well, promotion, that's the Ames case, a pay raise, work assignment, or access to training and development opportunities. And actually, I just am completing an assessment, and this is one of the things that they wanted to measure in addition to our standard measurement. They wanted to know, what do we need training for in terms of DEI? Who needs to have it?
Mhm.
Like, do I need to have it? Do my peers need to have it? Or does management need to have it? And
Yes.
surprisingly, management needs more training is what the results are from that particular assessment. And color me not surprised.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, Chris, that I just want to emphasize is that, a lot of times we forget that our managers are tasked with implementing the law, right? And adhering to the law and being in compliance. And they are sometimes undertrained, underinformed, and yet the employees that they manage are often very aware of their rights. There are so many resources. So this is another call that I often make to my employer clients is, look, this is your call to action to catch up with your employees because I can almost guarantee they know their rights better than you know them. And you don't want to find that out in a court case.
Well, and the data supports that, the data that we've collected and then data that other organizations have collected. So do we have any leverage? And basically, in a nutshell, these laws shown here collectively provide a strong framework for workplace protect. Man, I can't talk today. But they safeguard employees' rights against discrimination. They promote equity and enforce safety and fairness. So for organizations, this means that they need to comply with these laws regardless of the changes in executive orders. Nancy, what do you have to weigh in on this?
So it's interesting. I want to go back, I think to even the little hiccup you and I had around the Ames case. And I think it's a perfect example, even though we didn't plan it this way, but I think it's a perfect example of how even when we're very well intended and we're trying to get it right, that we can step in it, right? I think that's another, it's again emphasizing the need for more training and conversation around it. There's also a need for creating these conversations as learning environments because look, these are difficult things to parse out, even for lawyers in the US Supreme Court. And we're asking you all to do this without law degrees, right? Without years of experience on a court. So, understanding that, I think what it comes down to for me is that recognize that there are a lot of different protected classes, and each state, as we mentioned earlier, may have different initiatives regarding and bans even regarding DEI, but they may also have additional protections for employees, right? The whole purpose of these laws is to help people continue working that want to work and that can perform the essential functions of jobs. That's the standard from the Americans with Disabilities Act. But ultimately, we look at that under Title VII as well. Everything comes back to the criteria of, are you looking, this is where the merit conversation is starting to transform a little bit too. Are you looking at objective data regarding someone's ability to do a job? Not did they go to the fanciest school, but do they have the skills? Can they do the job? And we're looking at this in so many different ways. And so the answer to your question, I think, on the slide is, do we have any leverage? Absolutely, because yes, you still have to comply. And the only way that I see you're going to be able to comply is continue to do various training that could fall under the term DEI, but maybe you just call it compliance now.
And this is where I'm gonna plug one of my colleagues' books. I hope you can see this. It is called Measuring Inclusion, Higher Profits and Happier People Without Guesswork or Backlash. And in it, there's so many examples, but one of them compares the success of employees from Ivy League schools compared to state schools and HBCUs and others. And, you know, when you've got this teeny tiny little pool, you might be getting, you know, the middle of the barrel or the bottom of the barrel of Ivy League, or would you rather have the top of the barrel from, you know, the University of Minnesota or CUNY or you know, any other school that isn't Ivy League?
Well, and I think you're hitting on something that we talk a lot about with employers now, that look, it's a lot of shortcuts, right? And I get it. You think that person graduated summa cum laude from Harvard, you're going to assume that that means they're highly capable. And yes, in certain places, they might be extremely capable of, for example, writing a law review article that might then translate into a high-level book or something along those lines, but maybe they're not as skilled. I'm not saying necessarily that the two can't coexist, but just as an example, they might be very introverted. They might not have the highest social skills, and you might not want them forward facing with clients. So this is what we're talking about, is that you need to start looking more critically at how you've framed your job descriptions. Have you created them, or did you just borrow them from a template that you found online?
Well, and that's something that we'll be talking about in our next webinar, is the talent cycle, you know, hiring, promotions, you know, career advancement, all the way to losing your job and hitting the road. So that will be next time. So what can companies do? You know, you know, we've already kind of talked about this. Companies should focus on compliance with foundational federal laws such as Civil Rights Act, ADA, ADEA, and others which are unchanged. Review your own policies and DEI programs to make sure that you're in alignment with those laws, and try and avoid overreacting to executive orders, which are limited to federal agencies, even though they've been adopted by some public and private organizations. Stay informed about legal and policy changes, you know, and as Nancy said, you probably want an employment attorney or someone like that in each of the states that you operate in. Invest in education and training. And I see the need for that all the time. And then maintain DEI efforts strategically by embedding them. One of the mistakes that a lot of organizations made in the DEI's history is they put it under human resources. And
Yeah.
that's where it lives. And that's where it still lives in a lot of organizations. But it should be overall, you know, if there's a head of DEI, by whatever name you want to call them, they should be, you know, the executive senior level. They're in all the conversations. They're helping with marketing and sales and forecasting and everything that has to do with people and with diversity, with equity, and
And I'm
mostly with inclusion. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and sorry, I just want to jump in there too and say, look, the other thing that I like employers to consider is that it's not just a title, right? It's not just one position, it's not just one department. And I like your idea of if you do, depending on the size of your organization, right, you might have one designated person that's coordinating a lot of things, but they do need to be involved in all those conversations, as you said. Alternatively, you can flip that and say everybody, as I said earlier, right? And you were kind of getting at everybody in your organization should be trained on these things. And we're talking about recognizing your own bias, resolving in various conflicts, right? Knowing what the chain is when conflicts get beyond your ability, right? All of this comes into your culture. And I think that's what we're ultimately getting to, recognizing that mutual respect if you have that, you're going to have a lot fewer needs for what we consider DEI initiatives, right? If the fabric of your company is to treat people fairly and with mutual respect and look for mutual benefit, as I like to say, employment as a partnership, then you're probably a lot less likely to have to worry about these kinds of lawsuits, compliance issues, executive orders, et cetera. And that's what we're talking about, is like, I think what happened with some of the DEI programs, and definitely not all of them, but I think what caused a lot of the intense scrutiny we're seeing now is that some people, because they weren't doing that self-checking and balancing, maybe went to where unintentionally their own biases were at play and they couldn't even see them, because that's how humans work, right? We have to be constantly self-reflecting. And as DEI professionals, we talk about this all the time. My biases aren't gone. I'm still a human being, and I'll develop new ones just because I live in a world, right?
Well,
With other people.
and it's really, I've been working in DEI related topics and jobs for about 20 years. And so I'm really working hard at it all the time. And I still put my foot in it every now and then. And I apologize. In fact, I did this on our recording of this original recording that didn't happen, where there was a person named Charley. And I said, Charlie, welcome. I haven't met you before. How are you? And the voice that answered sounded female. And I said, oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were, I didn't think you were female. And so I apologized offline on LinkedIn to Charlie, and Charlie said, don't worry about it. I'll be in the other sessions. You're okay. But even when we're working on it, we can still screw up. And, so give yourself a little bit of grace in that. As long as you don't make the same mistake over and over again, you're probably on a halfway decent path.
Well, and that's another big part of it again, right? Is mutual respect involves things like apology, and not just I'm sorry, but complete apology of I'm sorry specifically for what I did. Here's what I'm going to do to make sure I don't do that again. And then you need to give the other person time and space to see you actually do what you said you were going to do to rebuild their trust. And I think we forget about those things. We don't have room for apology and forgiveness necessarily. And what we're inviting employers to do now is really weave that in to your systems. Now, that's not, I realize that's not the easiest thing to do, and it may be easier said than done, but stick with us, because we really feel like that's the direction that employers are going to have to go, especially if you're continuing to stand firm on your DEI initiatives. There's going to be this weaving, this and with weaving we could also say bobbing and weaving, because the law keeps changing, right? And so you have to be, yeah, you have to be agile, right? And you have to be willing to take an occasional strategically planned risk, right? Usually with some advice from legal counsel, but recognize that there is still a lot of room. That's what the big message we want you to get, is there's a lot of room, and you still have a lot of responsibility around DEI, whether you're allowed to say DEI.
So DEI for real, the lead portion. Excuse me. What can you do? You can protect yourself legally as a citizen, as an employee. You can, learn how to act as a leader, looking out for others who may be marginalized or who are, your direct reports or even your colleagues, and then practice self-care. Would you like to touch on each of these, Nancy?
Yeah, I think you hit on something that I heard differently today. And it's funny, this is part of the conversation, right? Is the longer you're in this and the longer you're in this training, this world, always listening for something different, right? That's the learning environment, is thinking about how to protect yourself legally as an employer may be one thing, as an employee may be something slightly nuanced. But ultimately, what we're talking about is how do you avoid, I think, under the executive orders, how do you avoid Department of Justice investigation, criminal investigation for a DEI initiative? That's one of the big concerns for employers. But as an employee, I don't hear a lot of risk for you. What I'm inviting an employee to consider, and this is whether you're a first line employee, a middle manager, or an executive, remembering that as an executive, you're still an employee of the company you work for, is recognizing that you do still have some responsibility legally to abide by Title VII, the ADA, the ADEA, et cetera. So that's one level of protection. But again, recognizing that we're all muddling through this and listening for opportunities to come together instead of to divide. I think that's another big call to action I have for people lately is it's easy to listen for what people do wrong. It's a different conversation, as you maybe noticed with me and Chris earlier, is Chris and I are committed to each other and to you all. So we're listening for, even when we have a little disagreement about something, or we see things a little bit differently, listen for where the bridge can be, we put together, right? Like where we can build that bridge. So that's one thing that protects you not only legally, but it also enhances your workplace. And that's leadership, right? Leadership is how do we come together? And you said something else that I really, again, heard differently is when you mentioned watch for people that are marginalized. And I just, again, wanted to stress that we're talking about not just marginalized in the macro level out in the world, but we're also talking about the place where you have the most influences is in the micro, right? Who's being marginalized in your workplace, in your work group, who's right there with you. You have a lot more influence there. I'm not saying don't go out and protest and make your voice heard, but you have a lot more control over the micro, which is your little world. And that's where you can make a huge impact. So please do not forget about that, which brings us to that last piece of
Well, I want
make
to
sure you're
add
having
something.
self-care. So yes, go ahead,
I
Chris.
want to add something to that is, and this was another faux pas on my part. And I'll try and make the story short, but basically I saw someone being treated unfairly at an Applebee's to a DoorDash person. And the bartender was very rude. You can't sit there, go somewhere else. And the DoorDash person happened to be a young Black male. And I saw this happening and I jumped in there and I was arguing with the bartender and finally she gave up because I just kept pointing out that there wasn't a problem with him sitting next to me. And she eventually gave up and went in the kitchen to do something. And I turned to the guy and I said, doesn't that bother you? And he says, I'm used to it. So he was ready to let it blow off. But me, I chose to be an ally. But what I did not do, and what I will always do going forward, is I will ask permission. I didn't.
Yeah.
I could have said, and it would have been so easy, do you mind if I say something to the bartender? Do you mind if I pitch in there? And he could have said, nah, don't worry about it. In which case I would have shut up. But if you're going to act as an ally for someone who's being marginalized, ask their opinion. Do they
Yep.
want your help? Or are you being, nosy? Do they want to be do they prefer to be in the background? Do they prefer no confrontations, no difficult conversations? Ask their opinion. So that's just my little story on
And I love that. I know we're going a little bit deeper, and it's taking a little form that's slightly different from our original
It
session.
is.
But I love this because I think this is another example of how the more you have these conversations, the more you see in them. And I know as a busy leader, that may be very difficult. And when I say leader, again, I'm talking about you're leading from wherever you are. Every person on this webinar, everyone that's watching the recording, you're all leaders. I'm calling you into that, calling you out for it. I'm expecting that from you, right? But I would think about that story that you just told and doing the Title IX investigations and working on those cases when I was at the college. That's another perfect example of how some people have different preferences, right? Some people don't pursue sexual harassment claims, for example, because they can get very sticky, and they may choose confidentiality in certain places based on religious preferences, just past experiences. And you're absolutely right. The person that's experiencing it is the one that gets to choose. And likewise, we don't always have all the evidence, right? As a lawyer, I have to remember that I'm literally doing a video on this later about how to do a fair and impartial investigation. And one of the things is to not come up with a decision, not have an opinion about the situation before the investigation is complete. And I see that repeatedly in workplaces that then end up with a lawsuit is because they did go in with an opinion about the parties, about the facts of the case before they had all of them, and they develop a theory of the case. So that's another thing we have to be careful of in a world where there's so much information coming at us all the time. We're quick to judge. And I know the wheels of justice turn slowly, but they do for a reason, because we run the risk of making even bigger mistakes. So I'm inviting you to also do that, which means you're going to have that self-care in place as well, because there are going to be days that things are not moving the way that you want. We're going to read news stories that freak us out. We're going to see things that happen that really upset us. And if we're not taking care of ourselves, we're going to step in it, and we need to lead.
Thank you. Thank you. So, oh, these are some, we'll put this in the notes. Impactivize, that's the one that we were talking about. It's Nancy Levine Stearns.
That's right. Nancy Levine Stearns.
Is the name. Oh, and there's a simple backlash-free definitions of DEI. That's a Forbes article by Paulo. Project 2025 tracker. This is like a visual thing. It's got little bars that move, and then it goes complete, completed, like defunding USAID. Done.
Right.
Although that might get rolled back. So who knows? But anyway, these are good resources for you. And if we think of any others before this is posted, we'll put them in there. And these are some of our upcoming topics. I did have people put down which ones they would prefer. So that's how we ordered our different topics that are going to be, we've figured out up through September. So there's that. And I think, oh yeah, that's this. Never mind.
Yep, there we go. That's what we're working on now.
So, oh, do I have to stop share? Boop. There we go. So I hope you join us on our next ones. Nancy's going to post the recording on her channel. I will post it on Spectra's. And we welcome your questions, your comments, your feedback, because we want to make this better and useful. We don't want to skip over parts, but if we're too basic, let us know that. If we're too advanced, let us know that. Any closing comments, Nancy?
That's okay. I'll respond to either as I told you before. I live in New York. I've been called worse. And look, I've been called worse in my family probably. So. But I think I want to just emphasize again that our goal with this webinar series is, again, that's why it's DEI for real. It's to reassure you, educate you, activate you in a way that works with your life. That's something else that, as leaders, right, which is the L, is recognizing that you don't have to take on everything. Each of us has something to contribute. Right. And so what we're asking you to do is take a look at what really matters to you in these conversations and look there. Imagine if just 1 hour a month, everybody dedicated toward this movement. We could shift the whole world, right? And we know we're not going to necessarily get the whole world involved, and not everybody's going to give an hour, but you can start looking at what skill set do you have that you can contribute to more inclusive and what I would like to think of as more sustainable workplaces.
Thank you. We'll see you all next time, we hope. Bye-bye.